yeah, I'll be moderating. I'll be lucky enough to moderate this great panel discussion to discuss how, yeah, oops, that's not what came.
A few more icons.
But it's black, sorry. False start. Okay, now. So yeah, welcome in. So yeah, thank you a lot for joining that interesting session on agroecology. So today we will explore together how to unlock the potential of agroecology and starting and getting to know some initiatives, some practical initiatives from farmers. So we have Jennifer Node with us, so I'll make a nice presentation of each of the speakers. But yeah, our idea today is really to understand from practice, from the scientific side also with nice researches on understanding also the financial flows, how is agroecology being funded and supported by public authorities, and also of course movements. So yeah, we are co-organizing this workshop today together with Perszaal Anders and with Ingrid today, who is coordinating the Perszaal Anders network. So just to give you a bit an overview what to expect from this session. So yeah, Ingrid, if you want to say.
Thank you, Elena. Also from Perszaal Anders, it's the network of agroecology in Flanders. We are very pleased to welcome you on this session on agroecology. What you can expect from the workshop today, we will to understanding the stakes, gain a comprehensive understanding of what is at stake for the development of agroecology in Belgium and also in Europe. We explore the challenges, opportunities and the transformative potential that agroecology holds for the agricultural landscape. And Elena shall now also present the different persons and other being part of the workshop.
Yeah. So yeah, we will be, as I just shortly said, starting from the ground up. So yeah, we will have Jennifer telling her story as an organic vegetable farmer. So yeah, she has two projects where she's actively involved in. One is a community-supported agriculture project here just around the corner in Beerbeek. So yeah, she's been running this CSA farm since 13 years and can explain what is her understanding of agroecology, how she puts in practice. And also since 2 years, she has a very interesting project in cooperation with the city of Leuven, managing 16 hectares together with 5 other farmers, so showing also initiatives from local cooperation with local governments. So that's a first topic. Then we will have Caroline Amron from the CITRA research group based at the city of the University Catholic de Leuven. Sorry, I mixed languages. And she will be explaining, following also the money trails, and really have a dive into the financial landscape on how is agroecology funded. And she will give us the result of a study that was run in Wallonia. So yeah, that will be interesting to have a look at CAP fundings, how they support or not agroecology. And finally, we will have Leuven Savels from the University of Ghent. So Leuven is a PhD researcher on agroecology in Flanders. So we will have both perspectives from Wallonia, Flanders, but also, of course, opening up the conversation at the European level. So yeah, that's and then of course we will have an open discussion on how what's your understanding of agroecology, and that's actually what we will start with now. So yeah, you can scan this QR code, and we are actually interested in seeing what is when you hear agroecology, what idea comes to your mind. So we can censor the results because we cannot show them there, but we can tell them out loud. So please, in the next minute, if you can come with the idea that's popping to your mind. And that will be a nice start in the conversation. Let me see, we already have some results. So we hear low input agriculture, organic, biodiversity, more sustainable. So yeah, let's maybe move to the next point where Anders will present the network and the initiatives, and then we can come back to that Mentimeter and figure the conversation also with you all.
So Perszaal, as I told, we are a network for agroecology in Flanders. We are a movement, and maybe you know, agroecology is not only a practice, like what farmers do on their land, but it's also a movement and it's also a science. So we are, let's say we have 29 members, which are indicated there. I'm not just telling who it are, but we have organizations more busy with the environmental topics. We have organizations who really work with farmers and support farmers, like Bioforum, which are the organic farmers, for example. There are also organizations just working with the short chains and helping farmers to in that context. We have also the Global South in our movement and so on. So we are very, our network is very broad in Flanders. Then how we work, we have a lot of policy and advocacy work. For example, we make, we are involved with the laws there are in Flanders, also at the EU level. When there is a new law, for example on seeds, which is very important for the agricultural movement, we also do policy work and advocacy work. We have also made, but it's in Dutch, 11 big lines, what is agroecology and which kind of policy measures are necessary to make agroecology in Flanders realize. Besides that, we have also a think tank of scientists, because we, as I told already, science is also very important in all the agroecological movements, and we have contact with scientists they support us, we support them. Then besides that, we have also a lot of public events, like we have Kienkracht, which is a very big event. It was 2 days ago in Ghent, where we had 400 people just coming there for debates, for workshops, for visits to farmers, also performances and so on. And we have also the Food Film Fest, which is another big initiative where we have 5 films on agroecology, and we ask our local groups to make an evening with films, and so we reach 4,000 people in those months where we have this Food Film Fest. So that's the way we try to make our network broader and to make agroecology also more, we create more awareness with people about what is this about. We work also with farmers, and we made also, for example, 7 stories of farmers who are already agroecology. So that's the work we do. I'm not trying to take too much space. And then what do we stand for? Yeah, we have the 13 principles of agroecology. I think most of you know about those principles. But we have also the Nijleni Declaration. It was a meeting with a lot of international small groups, grassroots groups, farmers, and so on. And they were 2 times now again. They came together and trying to get what is agroecology for us as a grassroots movement. So we also follow the principles of Nijleni. And what is important, and maybe then that's the conclusion of the principles, we consider agroecology as an engine to radical transformation of food systems as a whole. So that's important. It's not only a practice, but it's also a changement of our food system. And that's the way we are working on to that.
Great, thank you so much. And I actually just noticed I forgot to present myself. So my name is Elena Andul, and I'm part of Agroecology Europe Association. So just also to give you a few words of who is organizing. So yeah, we are a European association promoting agroecology. So it has been founded in 2016 with the idea to really promote agroecology as a set of practices, so also supporting farmers and changing their practices on the ground, but also in linking researchers together with farmers and also the civic society to really also have a European platform at the European level to promote agroecology and to also come with bottom-up ideas and align together to change European food systems. So that's the basic idea behind the association. If you want to become members, of course, always welcome. So yeah, just to give you some ideas, I don't know how familiar, maybe I'm sure some of you are really familiar with agroecology, but yeah, to echo what Ingrid just said, agroecology has been defined through 13 principles by the high-level panel of experts on food security from the United Nations. And yeah, it's been defined by certain principles. So first, recycling of nutrients. So I will maybe not go for time management reasons, but of course, if you are interested by detail on those principles, we can develop later. But yeah, as you see, agroecology is defined through agro-ecosystem level, so changing practices on the ground in the fields, but also through food system scale, and also changing the governance level, see how we can connect also better consumers and farmers, and that echoes with the practical ideas. So I will not go so much in detail on why agroecology to leave more space for speakers, but yeah, it's also defined through 3 pillars, so science, practice and movement, and we'll hear also from researchers in the panel on how is agroecology research, what does it involve with the relationship with farmers and practitioners. So yeah, I'm opening now and giving the floor to Jen so that we can hear a bit more on practices. So Jen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So my name is Jen Knowles, and I'm an organic farmer, as Elena mentioned, working in 2 different initiatives, and I'll tell more about that in just a minute. But I also love to cook and eat, and I love vegetables, I love beans, and that's part of my story as well, and it should be part of our story as well. It's about food, it's about eating, so I'm in the middle of it. And it's kind of funny to find myself here today in a session on agroecology, because I've been hearing about agroecology for years, and I always thought, why use such a complicated name to just thought it's this 5,000 franc name and keep it simple. And I really resisted even learning much about it because I thought it was so complicated. And then just preparing for this session, it's like, oh, this is quite interesting. It's like, oh, actually I'm an agroecological farmer, as it turns out. So thank you for the opportunity to learn more about ecoecology by taking part in the session. I became an ecological farmer by becoming an organic farmer, and I think the process is interesting to share with you because it's also connected to policy. I'm what you would call a new farmer. I don't come from a farming background, maybe with the exception of my grandfather in Canada who used to sell international tractors. But for otherwise I did completely different work, and at the age of 48 decided it was time to change and do something different. And I had discovered this program called Landreizer in Belgium, which is the training program for organic farming. And they advertise themselves as being a program for people, young people who want to start farming, or for older people who want to make a career switch. And I thought, yes, it's the place for me. So I signed up, and that was quite a number of years ago in the meantime. And I had 2 years of interesting classes, visits to different farms. But most importantly, just lots and lots of time doing an internship and learning how to drive a tractor and discovering what kind of organic farm suited me as a farmer. And basically it sort of set me up to be able to take a flying start, and just after the program finished, to, in 2012, start my own farm, and it's a CSA farm called the Bitterbeek. You can go to the next slide. So CSA in Flanders is a quite well-known model, but and in some other countries less known. But it stands for, the CSA stands for Community Supported or Community Shared Agriculture. And I'll just describe sort of the mechanics of how it works, so that the farmer produces food for a local community of eaters who commit to an annual subscription to the farm, which is paid in advance. In exchange for paying a share of the actual working expenses of the farm, which includes a salary for the farmers, participants receive a share of the harvest. The annual fee is fixed at the beginning of the year, depending on actual expenses, and is independent of the market value of the farm products which are being produced. The actual share of the harvest, which the participants receive, varies from year to year, depending on the season. We have some seasons that are good for tomatoes and others that are bad for tomatoes. It can change every year, it does change every year, but it's a tremendously diverse selection of seasonal vegetables and some fruit. The concept of CSA in many places and countries is used in conjunction with a weekly box scheme. So the farmer goes to the field, sees what kind of vegetables are available to be harvested at that point, puts them into a box, harvests them, puts them into a box, and people come and pick up their box of weekly vegetables at different depots. Our farm is a bit different, and it's a system that was started in the Netherlands and then picked up by the first person to start it in Flanders. And we actually work with a self-harvesting system, which is what you see in the pictures. So people come to our field. The field's always open. We work with flags. There's not a flag in one of the pictures. And they can see where they can harvest, and they harvest themselves. And it's possible. I grew up in the United States, and it would be very difficult in a place like the United States where you have very large cities, and then agricultural land is quite a distance away from those cities. But Belgium has this interesting, well, population density to start with, but also has this interesting sort of weaving together of urban and rural land, and so it's all very close to each other. And so, in fact, I'm only 10 kilometers away from Leuven, but there's still enough population density to find people who want to come and harvest, and they're able to do so. So it's a sort of, definitely the Flemish geography makes it easier. Participants also take place in various decision-making processes in running the farm via winter meeting and different other moments where we have for checking in and getting feedback. On 1.2 hectares of land, we provide seasonal organic vegetables for more than 330 people and generate sufficient income to pay for 1.7 full-time farmers with additional seasonal help. Subsidies are a negligible element in our annual budget. The field also serves as what we call a small food hub, so that we work together with other local producers, for instance, someone who has fruit and juices, someone who makes cheese, someone else who makes bread. They bring their products to the field. People can order directly from those farmers and pick them up at our field. So that's sort of the mechanics of how it works. But there's another side to it, and I think one of them is that I think I have a fabulous job. This is a picture from a party that we had celebrating 10 years of our farm. And the farm is a lot more than just the mechanics of how it sort of fits together in the economic model. But for me, the farm is everything about connection. And a colleague of mine recently said, farming is a social act. And I thought, yeah, what a great sentence. And it's very tangible on our field. And for me, as a farmer, it's important. When I was just getting started, I rent my land from another farmer, and he said, "You'll see, Jen, farming is a lonely job." And if you think about farming these days, it's a tractor, it's a farmer in his tractor alone on some big field. And I thought, okay, well, we'll see. And I'm definitely not lonely. But I think it's, and one of the things I like about that is that I like having a direct connection as a farmer with people who are eating the vegetables that we're growing and being able to have a conversation about these beans. Flemish people don't eat beans, but beans are really delicious and they're fun to grow, and they're significant in terms of this food transition that we're needing to make. So it's great to be able to have a conversation with people about beans and talk about how to prepare them and what kind of recipes, etc., etc. So I enjoy that connection. And on the other side of the picture, I'll just say a simple sentence, but all of our harvesters or eaters know their farmer. And it's actually quite a radical statement because I think most of the people who don't eat don't know the people who produce the food that they're eating. We were at a family party, and I had recently had a whole collection of things, and then there was vegetables from here, and then cheese from Dominique, and blah, blah, blah. And somebody at some point looked at me and said, "Jen, it must be really special to know the people who produce the food that you're eating." It's like, it's so obvious to me, I forget about it, but it's quite special that the people who eat food know the person who produced it. And I think that there's tremendous power in the system reconnecting farmers and eaters. We become utterly disconnected from our food system as consumers. Farmers have for many become an annoyance who leave mud on the roads and block the highways with their protests. Most vegetables in the supermarkets are available year-round. Consumers have forgotten all about the seasonality of vegetables. And in some ways it's kind of easy. I mean, what we have right now is limited. You know, we have parsnips, we have winter postulaine, we have some sprouting broccoli, we have beans. And it takes more time, it takes more creativity. But all of that has sort of gotten lost. And what's happened is that because of people primarily eating out of the supermarket, our palette of what we consume has dramatically decreased. So people go to the supermarkets and come out often with the same things in their car from week to week. Make sure you get a lettuce and grab some tomatoes. And in Belgium, you have to have carrots, celery, and leeks to make your soup. But it's sort of quite a standard supply. And so this is a completely different experience. And there was an interesting, in the presentations, there was an interesting, and it's a detailed, no, I'm not there yet.
Sorry.
Just wait. But, or you can go to the party, that's fine too. Yeah. But there was an interesting element in both of your presentations about level 4 and about reconnect the consumers and the producers through the development of alternative food networks. And in one presentation said reconnect consumers and producers, and your presentation said reestablish the connection between growers and eaters. And I think that it's important to keep it personal. It's not about producers and consumers, it's about farmers, and it's about people who eat the food that farmers produce. And why is that so important, and why is that reconnection so significant? I'll give you a couple of examples from our field. So what I see in the people who come and harvest with us, and we send out weekly mails and have lots of conversations with people, but they rediscover what it actually means to produce food. And an example was 2 years ago, we had a terribly dry summer. It was really a challenging summer for us as farmers. Everybody, we have people who live right next to our field with their backyards bordering our field. Everybody was busy having a barbecue every 3 days and loving it. It's like, great barbecue weather. And then it started raining and everyone said, oh, it's raining. Well, for us, our perception or experience of that weather was completely the opposite. It was an extremely difficult summer, and we were so happy that it finally decided to rain. And we're in the possibility of being able to communicate that to the people who are members of our farm, and help them understand what it means to be a farmer and what it means to grow food, and what the impact of climate change is on us as farmers, and finally on them as eaters, because some of the crops fail as a result of what the weather's doing. And there's sort of this disconnect from food and weather. So it's something I get quite emotional about. And another thing that I see happening that I think is also really significant is that I feel like we can have an impact on people's eating habits. And eating habits are incredibly difficult to change, and I know it comes up at different moments and different places. And you know, everybody's trying to sort of get people to eat beans. Like beans, oh, they're healthy for you. It's like, that's not going to work. So they're looking for all sorts of different ways to sort of make beans sexy and sort of, and it's hard to change people's eating patterns, and yet we're going to need to be able to do it. So, I mean, what happens is that people commit to a year, they pay a significant amount for a year, and so they're basically bought into, you know, we want to get our most out of it, and so they come and they harvest what's available. And then it's like, well, I guess I'm going to need to figure out what this is and what I can do with it, because it's the only leaf vegetable that's available right now. So that it basically, in some ways, forces people to get creative. And that's what they tell other people who are considering joining the field. They say, yeah, it makes you really creative. I mean, you have to really think about what you're going to, you know, if you have your standard menus for the whole week, it's sort of a jarring perspective. And so I think it really sort of forces people or invites people. It's an opportunity to, you know, really broaden the palette of what they eat. And I think another element that's really significant is that it's also an opportunity to introduce young people to food that's being produced right there in their neighborhood, and it's edible. We have school groups that come and visit, and I love it. It's like we pull a kohlrabi out, and it's like, so who knows this? Nobody knows it. So who wants to try it? There's a few that are hesitant, but most people you know, 7, 8-year-olds raise their hand and they're actually really interested in trying stuff, often more than their parents are. So I think there's something powerful about exposing young people to a broader palette of food. And there's this incredibly painful disconnect that we sometimes run into. And if you speak Dutch, it's interesting, it's easier to follow. But in Dutch, the word for carrot is wortel, and the word for root is a wortel. And at some point, a colleague of mine told me a story about one of the people at their farm who said, "Oh, you mean that a carrot or a wortel is actually the root or the wortel of a plant?" Oh! Oh my goodness. We've come a long way. And what we also hear from parents is that the kids eat more vegetables if they've come and harvested themselves, so that we're really having an impact on what people are eating. And so I think it's really about broadening, personalizing the basis and the understanding and the involvement around working at the future of food and making it personal and making it specific. Speaking of broadening, our second project is the Herpendaal. 2 years ago, the city of Leuven, and there was a whole session on it at some point in these 3 days. 2 years ago, the city of Leuven launched a call for proposals for access to certain public grounds in the context of their local food strategy 2030, which is entitled, in fact, Food Connects. It's a nice name for the project. The criteria the projects were judged on included sustainability, ecology, innovation, feasibility, and social value. My colleague Anna and I, together with 2 other CSA vegetable farmers, that's Greet and Sophie on the right of the slide, one person who makes cheese, Dominique is on the left of the slide, and she's working with cows and making cheese. And then Bram in the middle is actually a person who specialized in fruit, and he has high stem fruit trees, I don't know the word in English, and makes fruit and fruit juices, and he's also specialized in landscape management. And so we put together a proposal for an extensive, circular, organic, biodiverse agricultural project, and we won. So we're currently in season 2 of farming here at the Herpendaal, and it's in the backyard of actually a large psychological hospital that you can see in the backyard of the picture, called Sint Camillus, who is actually the 7th partner, if you want to, in our project, and we're currently in all sorts of interesting conversations about delivering food to their kitchen, about involving their patients in the agricultural work, about perhaps involving them in the kitchen, of preparing vegetables, etc., etc. So the next slide is a picture just of the system. So it's a circular system with fixed and rotating elements, so that there's milk cows, which are in a rotational grazing system, and they're used for producing cheese by Dominique. There's an agroforestry parcel with 90 to 100 fruit and nut trees. There's various landscape elements with multifunctional hedges, biodiverse field edges. And then there's vegetables, grain, and innovative crops like beans that rotate through a big part of it. With food produced at the site, going to Leuven, going to Sint Camillus, going to the 2 CSAs who are part of it, so that the offset in English. The distribution or the marketing is all local, and it's an integrated, cohesive system. For example, our vegetables follow the grass clover 1 minute that has been pooped on by Dominique's cows. We don't need to do anything else to our vegetables. Oh, I'll go fast. Next slide. So I just want to say, in these days of polarization between farmers and nature, we choose resolutely to farm with nature. And we're busy creating a boerenlandschap, a farming landscape. And it's absolutely about the middle of your 13 principles of synergy, and about connecting all the diverse elements, which is what makes it robust and strong. And the integration of non-productive landscape elements were all made possible because of the contract we have with the city, which has a price and a duration that gives us the space to not have to squeeze as much as possible out of every single square meter of land that we have. So that's definitely a big part of what's made the whole thing possible. I have some recommendations.
Okay,
jump
to
that.
Great.
So, recommendations from my own experience. System change will come from above, but also from below. Don't forget the eaters. Keep talking about food. Make it personal. Talk about eaters and farmers, not consumers and producers. Continue to support new food initiatives through the chain, including the consumer or eater, and changing how we eat. For example, projects around beans. So those projects are important, and it's important to include the whole chain through that. The food and health and safety regulations remain a challenge for small-scale producers who want to process their products. It's a topic that's been on the table for a long time. Support the short chain initiatives connecting eaters and farmers. Unfortunately, the Flemish subsidies for the network that we're a part of was slashed this last year. It's a CSA network. Facilitate and fund programs which provide access to agricultural organic farming training for new and existing farmers. The Flemish subsidies for landwezen were slashed this year. Continue to support organic initiatives because they significantly overlap with agroecology initiatives. Watch out for greenwashing in these initiatives. There's a lot of greenwashing going on. Pay attention to herbicides, not just pesticides. Flanders is struggling with the implementation of their organic strategic plan. Hopefully they'll be able to put a little more gas there. Some municipal governments have tremendous potential, and the example here of what Leuven has been doing is great. Ruben will tell you about what the city of Ghent has been doing. Pricing is an issue. There still remains a gap between sustainably produced food and the price for it and the price otherwise, and it's very interesting to look at that and think initiatives such as true cost accounting might be very valuable. Flanders is the worst student in the class. European is, from what I've understood, as far as water quality goes. Don't shoot the cow, shoot the system. Be indignant. System change, agricultural and economic, is necessary. Postponing a pesticide law is not the solution. Focus on soil health. Herein lies our future. And don't forget to see yourself as an eater in this system that needs help. What do you eat? Where do you buy your food? In French, they talk about consommateurs, that are consumers who also have an impact on systems because they're an actor as well. What you consume has an impact on the system. And Wendell Berry talks about eating is an agricultural act. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Jen. That was very great words that we need all to hear, and even if sometimes we are familiar with comments, it's always great to hear it from someone who lives it. So thank you so much. And we have the opportunity then in the last half an hour. So sorry to be a pain in the ass with the timing, but then we have time to discuss all together. So yeah, we will move then to Caroline, who will present with us the financial flow. Yeah, that's maybe easier. So yeah, from Flanders to Wallonia, and to also having a more common understanding also on where does the money go, and yeah, understanding also how we finance. So Caroline, the floor is yours, and if you want, I'll tell you 5 minutes limit and 1 minute things, and if you want to, or
no, thank you, Jane. And I'm gonna be also emotional. so sorry to the audience. I will do a slow start. But thank you for the opportunity to present you the results of the study we've been working on with my team. So we try to study the financial flow that goes towards agroecology in Wallonia. So first, let me introduce you to my team, because I didn't do that work alone. I'm part of a team that's called CITRA, so for Transition of Systems. We are based in Leuven. We are a team of 5 PhD students and 8 research assistants working on more short-term studies. We work with Professor Philippe Barret, that some of you may know. He's been one of the defenders of agroecology since the early hours, and so he's we are always keeping an eye on agroecology and how it's evolving. The food system change is so passionate and so interesting, and but still we had to choose some thematics of research. So we focused on food value chains, so really documenting the upstream and downstream, the actors, how they interact with each other, and how sometimes the price also is constructed. We work on the systems of production in Wallonia, but I think it will be in Flanders, will be the same. We have a diversity of systems of production, not just one black and white. So it's really complex, and we try to document it as well, because it's not so well done. And we use all those data to work on transition pathways. So we will be doing quantitative transition pathways, so producing scenarios, but also qualitative elements, so working on foresight type of studies. And I would also like to share with you some principles of action, because they will echo probably in the presentation that I will do. So we are convinced of inclusivity. So within the team and within the way we do our research, we would always include all the actors from the system. So starting with the really niche actors, but also going with the regime actors, so more conventional ones. We believe it's important in a transition perspective, in a change of system perspective, to consider a different starting point of the actors and taking where they are and to go all together towards a new horizon. We work at the meso level, so we are not working on the farm exactly, and we're not working on high schemes policy, but we really working on what's happening between the farm and the regional or national policy. And finally, but it's an important one, we are always approaching our studies with a transdisciplinary approach, so always working with actors from the field, from farmers who know exactly their land, what are the difficulties, what are the realities, and including those knowledge in our research. The study I'm presenting to you today is not it's not the product of only a research team. It was the results of a collaboration between research and action. So, few words more on C-Tribe than I stop. We have worked on our purpose, and the purpose of our team as a research team is to build scientific knowledge on agriculture and food system in a rigorous and interdisciplinary way, but with the aim of providing stakeholders with the keys to a transition towards fair and sustainable system. Therefore, when Agroecology in Action came to us saying, well, we have a key question here, would you be able to work on this with us? We were really happy to do that. And Agroecology in Action, for those who don't know the movement, represents a broad movement that is taking concrete action to promote the transition to agroecological and solidarity-based food systems in Belgium, but with a strong focus in Wallonia, because Woods and Anders is more focusing in Flanders. This collaboration led us to ask ourselves some questions, and what do we want to do? How do we want to work on this question? So we reached that final simplified question. What is the level of funding of agroecology by the Walloon government in this current government? So looking at the fund and the financial flow from 2019 to 2024. I will switch to agroecology and to agroecological transition during the whole presentation. Sorry about that, it's maybe also to simplify the flow of my speech, but we are always looking at more systemic approach, of course, so more of a transition to agroecology. The scope, so we tried to identify and study all the agricultural and food-related budgets that were spent by the Walloon government, including two caps. Because of the time span we chose, we had the former cap and the current cap. We worked with the methodology developed by a team of the Coventry University, so it's a whole framework that was developed by this research center, Agroecology, Water and Resilience, who is strongly involved in the whole agroecological movement. I'm going to show you now a few steps about the methodology. I hope it will not be too tricky or too annoying, but then I'll fastly switch to the results. 3 steps I'm going to introduce to you. First, we have to develop this exhaustive database, because we want to study some financial flows, but where do we look? Where do we find this information? That was the first trick. But we were in capacity of identifying 143 financial flow, more or less. And we had to eject 21 of them because we didn't have sufficient information either on what's happening. So we have a line, we have a budget, but we don't know what's happening with that money. Or sometimes we just have a line with no budget and no information, but maybe something is happening there in Wallonia. So in total we could identify a budget of 2.5 billion euro for 122 financial flow that were to be analyzed of what's happening in Wallonia. Important remark, within that study we could only analyze the intention of financing. We didn't do an on-the-ground check on what if the money was indeed well financed, well spent, really implemented. So of course there could be further studies that would challenge the results, but so that you know the limits maybe of the study, it's only looking at what's being announced by the government. And then we have those 122 financial flow, we have to qualify them. Do they not contribute to agroecology? For that we mobilize the framework I told you about, or the Coventry University. And the objective is to give a score to each of the 13 principles that Elena introduced to you. So for each of the 13 principles, we look at the project and say, okay, this score's good, this score is not so good. It doesn't talk about connectivity, it doesn't talk about soil practice, so it's a 0, it's a 1. And then we get some scores. We identify a first group, a group of financial flow that do not at all contribute to agroecology, and one group that does in a way contribute, mention, give some contribution to agroecology. We have a first group. First result already, even we are in the methodology, but we can identify that 63% of all this big budget of Wallonia is absolutely not contributing to any type of transition or agroecological transition. 37% seems to be in a way contributing to agroecology. And we say, well, it's pretty honest, 37% is pretty good. Wallonia is quite progressive, and well, maybe we were a bit skeptical on this number. So we went through the literature and bibliography and identified also with the network that there was another way to go a bit further and to sharpen a little bit the numbers and say, well, each financial flow got a score. So maybe we can multiply that score by the budget. And maybe it will give us a better understanding or better view or better critic on what is actually which money is actually going to agroecology. So we have a third budget, so we have both group A and B, and then there's this third last budget that's called AE. I keep a bit of a suspense, and then we move to the results. So that's basically the methodology that was implemented. I'm going to talk to you about 4 results, and this is for structure. I'll go through it. Result 1, and it's now something we advocate for all the time, and I'm going to talk about that also in the recommendation. But we had a really hard time identifying and looking for the data. So unsatisfying access to public data, very scattered information. We had to go to activity reports, to some strategies, or even our public research center would not be documenting that nicely on how much they would spend on that. And we had to estimate budget. Oh, it seems like they have 2 projects out of 10, so maybe it's 20%. And even from the public bodies or from the minister, there was a really limited disclosure of those financial flow, and absolutely no consolidated financial information on that topic. So that leads to our first, we think it's a big result, but how does the region pilot monitor and assess progress on this thematic? How do the ministry know if their action is actually contributing to any system change? Because money is going, money is flowing, but where, and to which results? And also, and that also a big question for lots of actors, is difficult for the civil society to make those ministries accountable for elements, because they say, yeah, we finance that, but then how much is it in total? So that was first observation. Second observation is that with all those scores we got on the 122 financial flow we analyzed, well, these scores were really low, so ranging from 0 to 20 or 40%, which was a bit disappointing. Some exceptions were there, so organic farming type of strategy were scoring high, but most of the financial flow obtained low scores. And why is that? It's because they would only focus on one or two of those agroecological principles. As Elena said, you have this food system approach or agroecosystem approach, and to support a transition, and it's also based on the methodology of Müller and al., is that you need to be tackling different of those principles. You need to be doing technical change, but you also need a change of a system. And most of our budgets are only pointing at technological change, or a bit of connectivity, quite a lot of connectivity, but not in relation with some change on the ground. So a limited amount of financial flow that will tackle food system and agroecosystem principles. Here I come to the number, result 3, only 10% of the analyzed budget does support agroecological transition. So here, sorry, there's a mistake in the numbers, but so we had a total of 2.5 billion, not 2.6. And then the group A is not contributing, group B contributing, but then only 10%, which then lead us to only 246 million, which is not a lot. It's, yeah, just those 10%. On this slide, I want to already move a bit to kind of the recommendation, but what do we want? We actually want that the budget supporting agroecology transition change, increase. So we want this envelope B to get bigger. But what we want also, what we would recommend, is that we also need to increase the agroecological ambition of the projects. We need the score to be higher. A fourth result was also to be, we were willing to look at who is in charge, who's taking responsibility, who's engaging in this agroecological AE transition. Is it the Ministry of Agriculture? Is it the Ministry of Environment? Is it another ministry, Ministry of Social Affairs, maybe working on social agriculture? Well, it appears that it's interesting to look at the image first and then look at the numbers. For the Ministry of Agriculture, it's all the budgets that are effectively contributing to AE only represents 8% of its budget. And that will be including the CAP and those big means of action. For the Ministry of Environment, well, and in Wallonia, for those who don't know, Ministry of Agriculture is more of a blue right side color, and Ministry of Environment is more of a green color. And this ministry has been spending 41% of its budget related to food, of course, to what we can call budget related to transition to AE systems. Stop, I dropped the word. But what's important to see is that 8% for the Ministry of Agriculture is 5 times bigger than what the Ministry of Environment has spent or could spend. So really, the Ministry of Agriculture has been spending more money towards this transition, but they have the capacity, they have the means of action to actually finance larger transition, but it was not done. All those results, oh, sorry, okay, I'll go fast. This maybe you can look a bit further, but usually what we see is that the Ministry of Environment, they will do like initiative, small niche, they will support small progress, small niche, that are incredibly innovative and interesting, but would be kind of specific, like only centered on a limited amount of actors, and not so inclusive. often the project are financing radical actors that know each other, are doing kind of similar action. And the Ministry of Agriculture would be spending some money on adaptive solutions. Let's move to sustainable agriculture with some elements, and that would be a bit more inclusive because I have more money. And what we want, or what we suggest with our team, is that we need to move, and for all the public policy, they need to move to the radar square, which means that we need radical solution and we need inclusive solution. So public policy should be looking at upscaling the money that they've spent on agroecology transition, but they have to have more ambition, and so it's kind of ecologization of their project. So the solution, and it's more of a joke, but I'm quite happy to play with it, is make agroecology great again. If there's one message. But in further words, in more words, in more details, the recommendation would be more data. We need to advocate for greater data transparency and government accountability on such transition. We need a wider scope, so this study has been done in Wallonia, it's probably going to be done in Flanders, and well, let's think about having that in other countries and in Europe. And we need greater ambition. We need to advocate for a proper strategy for agroecology transition with a greater support to projects and programs which integrate a radical but inclusive approach.
Thank you so much. Yeah, great. Thank you a lot, Caroline. That's really informative, and that was also a discovery, even if working on agroecology, seeing this word, this 10% only for government that we can also see as more exemplary than others on the cap is quite, so it should trigger action from NGOs, and that's great that research is also in support, and that echoes maybe with Jen, what you said about the fact that subsidies represent almost zero amount of your budget, so that's maybe what we need to call for the next cap. But then I'm happy that Ruben Savels is also with us, and then we move back to Flanders, and also explaining a bit, and having also a more general vision of what is at stake when talking about agroecology policies, what can we do, and how as European networks we can work on it. So please, the word is yours.
First of all, thanks for the opportunity as well. I've been asked to talk mostly on the development of agroecology and on policies and policy recommendations for agroecology, but I gave it my own little twist, as you will see in a minute. Stick along. So, as is probably clear by now, it's emerging as an alternative paradigm for more sustainable and agricultural food system, this concept of agroecology. As mentioned before as well, it's a science, a scientific discipline. Me as a scientist, I'm an agroecologist, I would like to say, using interdisciplinary scientific methods to research this problem that we have in our food systems. There has been increasing attention in the scientific sphere as well. Even in the few years I've been doing research on it, I've encountered this increase already. There's still a focus mostly on agronomy compared to the other dimensions, which are more in the socio-economic and political realms. And there's also increasing master programs, for example, also courses on agroecology in the ones at Ghent University, in which I'm also partly involved. There's also a living lab on agroecology and organic agriculture in Flanders, linked to Leuven, the research institute. It's called Living Lab Agroecology and Biologische Landbouw. Living labs are a key proponent of this kind of co-creation and participation dynamics, which is necessary in science for agroecology. But it's also a social movement, as you've seen, with, in the context of Flanders, most notably Voedsel Anders, of course, as the umbrella organization for agroecology, but also Boerenforum plays quite an important role, I feel, as a farmers' union, a farmers' organization, which is the smallest of all, in this field of very big farming organizations, but it plays a crucial role in defending peasants, farmers at the core, as a member organization and not as a lobby organization as much as some others would like to do. And then practices, of course. As a set of practices, most of these so-called agroecological practices, think about crop rotation, intercropping, using cover crops and organic amendments to the soil, minimization of external inputs, mostly synthetical inputs. These are often used, increasingly used, but they are not often explicitly called agroecological, although they might be, or maybe they should be. Also quite important is the link with organic agriculture indeed, because those two are very closely related. And as a proxy for the utilization of these kind of practices, we can refer to the share of organic agriculture as a way to see how far evolved the practice is of agroecology. And in Flanders, it's a meager 1.6% of farmland which is organic, which is comparatively to the Belgian average of 7.4 and the European average of 9.6. Quite a bit disappointing in my point of view. Then, maybe important to mention here also on the policy level, there's been some quite recent developments. For example, Go for Food, which is the Flemish food strategy launched, I think, 2 years ago, which includes different food deals. And in one of those food deals, the attention goes to agroecology. So that's already a big step forward, I would say. There's also a strategic plan on organics, details, you can look it up, I guess. And there's also several interventions which it says explicitly, but it should be implicitly, support agroecology. For example, some eco schemes, some conditionalities present in common agricultural policy, they do in effect align with agroecology, even though they don't use the word. What I'm personally doing, so doing research on the development of agroecology in Flanders, I started with looking from the ground up, indeed. I did research in 24 community-supported agriculture farms, just as the one that Jen is running. And I measured how agroecological those are, since those two are also, again, very much interlinked. If you think about agroecology in practice, you think of a CSA farm, and the other way around. Results, I think all of you can read this very colorful graph. Summarize it in one sentence, CSA farms score very well on all, in this case, 10 elements of agroecology, from agronomic ones to more social and economic and governance ones. Upcoming research from my side would be to assess financial flows towards agroecology, just as Caroline and her team did, and also the assessment of the integration of agroecology within education in Flanders, as it's quite a symbolic place where this kind of discourses and alternatives can take ground, and maybe should take ground. Looking at Belgium, it's of course a different picture, because agriculture as a policy domain is largely based in the regions, so either Flanders, Brussels, or Wallonia. Difficult to compare as well because of the different biogeographical situations, which give rise to different agricultural practices. So quite difficult to compare, and take note that the color scales are not equal, so it's maybe a bit more aligned than you would guess on this graph, but still difficult to tell a real Belgian story. On the EU level, there's a lot more to tell, which I won't go into the details of, but there's of course a lot of diversity in these developments, and you can take a look at how agroecology is developing when contacting Elena, when going to the website of Agroecology Europe, and when, for example, reading the mapping report on the development of agroecology, of which there's an ongoing one for the case of Belgium, if I'm not mistaken. With, of course, if you look at the European level, the gap as the elephant in the room regarding the scaling up and out. Next, my little twist. Instead of jumping to policy recommendations, policy discussions, I want to talk about governance and about power. So, agroecology is political, and if we want to look at the politics and the political agroecology as a discipline in science, we require this lens exactly looking at power and governance. because these are crucial elements when looking at sustainability transitions, from a systems perspective, if you want. Where we can identify a sort of regime, which is the current food system and the actors currently keeping it in place, and playing an important role and having power in this place, and a niche which largely can correspond to an initiative, to a concept such as agroecology. And governance is different from policies and politics because it's not only about what happens in these kind of buildings where policymakers, representatives make decisions, but also the mobilization and the shifting of power is a governance intervention, which can be steered not only by politics, but also from people, citizens who exercise democratic rights. It's also about how this power is exercised to take decisions or to not take decisions, and who benefits from these decisions and who does not benefit from them. And then policy, in the end, is just one of the many different governance interventions. I won't discuss this figure in detail, but I'm just going to repeat that we have a regime. We could identify the current food regime as bringing about negative consequences and unsustainable outcomes. And we have niche innovations, of which agroecology is one, which wants to push this regime into adapting and changing to the values and principles of agroecology. Take this with you. I'm going to use this framework more centrally. It's developed by Colin Anderson, also at Coventry University, so once more an important player in the scientific field, where we have the regime on top, agroecology on the bottom, and then it's talking about interventions and their effect on the regime or agroecology. Certain interventions, for example, I'll give many examples, but the ones suppressing and co-opting agroecology are the ones strengthening the regime, and the other way around. The ones maintaining the regime could be containing or shielding agroecology, and the ones nurturing and releasing and anchoring agroecology at the same time deconstruct and replace the current regime. And those are interventions which are transformative regarding agroecology. I'm going to present some general examples, but also some examples on the Flemish level, given that we're currently situated here, and that a thesis student of mine, Thibaut Kleisters, did this with this framework. So, some examples. Suppressing governance interventions are those who suppress or restrain people and processes that might be favorable to agroecology. Examples: ineligibility of farmers to apply for certain loans, grants, subsidies just because of their size, just because of the administration which they can't handle, for example. Also seed laws, which are increasingly put into place, which hinder and barrier replanting and trading farmer seeds, old varieties, which are not sold by these big farmhouses, let's say. But also food safety regulations, which make traditional food processing, things we've done for ages and we've all turned out quite fine in the end with it, are now being prohibited because our federal inspection agency doesn't really control that very efficiently, and that's the basic reason for these kind of things. Looking specifically at Flanders, there's two big examples already mentioned also by Jen. The decrease or withdrawal of subsidies to bottom-up agroecological initiatives, such as Landwezen, the education and training center on agroecology. Also the CSA network, which plays a crucial role in scaling up the concept of CSA farms as hers. Funding has been ended, and I can guess you can figure out what this means for this kind of network and bottom-up approach. It's a bloodletting. Co-optation, related to greenwashing a bit. It's when agroecology as a concept is incorporated into the regime, but only conforming its own principles. So saying, yeah, we're doing agroecology, we have a session on agroecology in this smallest room of the whole building. So this whole conference can be very proud of doing something on agroecology, but then again, does it really do the necessary things? Open question. Examples of these kind of co-opting initiatives are government programs mostly which appropriate the discourse, the practices, but only those who fit within their own point of view, and leaving the transformative ones out of the picture. For example, turning back to the food deal, great initiative, but having only one on agroecology while then the rest is not, for example, might give rise to the question, how far are you actually going, without mobilizing resources to those engaged with this food deal. Containing, as the word says, it's about maybe passively, also maybe actively keeping efforts to establish agroecology from developing. And examples for these are ingrained in requirements for standardized high-volume products in the conventional food chains. For example, if you have an ugly piece of cabbage, no one wants it in these conventional food chains, even though they're equally tasty, maybe even more, as an example. But also the non-recognition of local and traditional knowledge in science. For example, me as a scientist, it's difficult to get in grips with what farmers experience from a day-to-day perspective. And these kind of biases are ingrained and work against the development of agroecology. Some examples in Flanders, the investment fund is currently mostly financing large-scale agricultural developments, while then the ones who need much fewer resources for development are hindered from access to these developments. I'm going to maybe go a bit more quickly because my time is running out. Shielding interventions are the ones who might be useful for agroecology because it shields them from the regime. For example, mostly by granting exemptions. So local food councils who choose for public procurement of local and organic food, it doesn't change the system, but it shields them from the price incentives that play in the bigger field. Nurturing, even better, is allocating the resources to the key agroecological actors, such as the people sitting on the left-hand side of me, and giving them the agency to develop agroecology according to their own principles. This might be a structural subsidy to organizations such as these, but also some of the research ideas, research practices which have been put into place in this kind of living labs might be nurturing for agroecology as a whole. And lastly, releasing and anchoring would be dismantling the elements of the regime to release agroecology from the disabling environment of the regime itself, while then anchoring the values, the principles, the niche dynamics, and the actors engaged with transformative agroecology in place. I'm not going to read aloud the examples, but one of the good things in this case would be the inclusion of agroecological organizations in this development of the food deal, which is also happening. They're invited to the table, which is a good first step. Well, in the end, they don't have the same resources to partake in the same kind of processes. But that's a different story. Moving to my last leg of my presentation is, instead of jumping to policy recommendations, I think the first step would be governance recommendations. And to all people who can have an effect on this, please consider these first. Be aware of asymmetries in power relations and their manifestations in the form of, for example, discourse, biases in research. These things are not very visible at first. You have to look well, you have to question your own position of other people you come into contact with, the position behind discourses, behind opinions, and only then can you and should you move to equitable governance, which is very well illustrated with this little graph. And think about the case of agriculture and food systems and who this could represent, this little image. Move away from those interventions that suppress, co-opt, and contain, and move towards those that shield, but even better nurture, release, and anchor agroecology. And of course, this was the question from your side, policy recommendations in the end, and I have picked out 3 crucial ones, I think. Provide structural support, not project-based support, but structural support to bottom-up agroecological organizations and networks, just because they are going against the stream, but also going against the stream of money. So as a government who wants to do for the public good, please divert resources towards the agroecological organizations. Also, reorient your funding, which is currently going to the regime. So this is coupled to the first one. It's not only about giving more money to agroecology, but also diverting the money that's currently going to the regime towards agroecology to battle this asymmetry. And also finally, as mentioned in some examples, there's a lot of just legislative obstacles which have nothing to do with funding, but just legislation which currently hinders the development of agroecology. Please have a good look at those legislations and see where it could be a bit easier. Looking at the EU level finally, in my last slide, with upcoming European elections and a CAP reform in a couple of years, main recommendation from my side would be move away from area-based to farmer-based payments. Now, Europe is largely spending its money on paying land, rewarding the ownership of land, not cultivating the land, not farming, not performing labor on the land, but just owning the land. It's currently subsidized. So move away from this and reward farmers for the labor on the land. Also adapt tax rates to stimulate production and consumption of healthy foods and diets. For example, tax rates to labor are much too high in systems such as CSAs. Why would you tax something which is going to be needed in the future? We're going to need more people working on the land, not the back-breaking work, but sustainable and pleasure-giving work of agroecology. So a shift in the tax rates in this as well. Similarly, animal and plant-based proteins, just adapt your tax rates and you will already open up the gates for a new system. Endorse the sustainability targets that have been put forward before, which is quite relevant in these last weeks, and ensure just a fair and smooth transition as policymakers, instead of dropping these targets at the first signs of protest, because making this transition more painful, which is what you're doing by dropping them, will only result in a worse transition and will increasingly put farmers in protests on the streets surrounding you. Finally, a lot of these issues, food security, biodiversity collapse, farmers' income, farmers' health, human health, are interrelated, and you should tackle them as such as well, in a holistic, systems-based approach, to which, from my experience, agroecology has the best promises. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Leuven. That was really, reinforcing also each other's statements. But of course, that's also under discussion, under your comments. So maybe first, we have now 15 minutes to discuss and also hear from you. Maybe the first call would be if you have some clarification needs. So that's maybe a first, if someone didn't understand something or if you need some clarification, we can start with this. Does someone? No. Then the second round of question would be more, what do you come with when you go out of this room? What is something that triggers you, or what would you like to comment on this basis? So
maybe,
the floor is yours.
Maybe the Mentimeter results can be
the Mentimeter.
a good way of showing what people are thinking.
Oh yeah, that came big.
And we can project it.
No, I think we didn't. That works. Okay. So yeah, you see the Mentimeters. So we see biodiversity, sustainability at the core, movement, transition, working with nature, soil health. Yeah, that's great. Some of the principles of agroecology on there. but yeah, so no questions. Otherwise, I'll ask you some. Yeah, great. Yeah. Please present yourself if you can.
I'm Lisbeth. I work in SAMO. It's a social organization that works on the right of people to different themes, housing, good education, but also healthy food. So we work on the entrance to healthy food. And I sometimes read in the presentations transition to a solidarity-based food system, food security, circular and solidarity economy. But in the speak, I didn't hear anything about the entrance for food for everyone. So is it also an issue in your work, or is it something second base thing?
I can make a comment. For us as farmers, it's a challenge because we also need to cover our own income from our own income. I mean, from what we receive from our participants. But we do work with an internal solidarity mechanism, so we work with what we call a price fork, so that people can voluntarily pay less or more. And that makes, we can lower the threshold somewhat, but the reality remains that it's a challenge. And I dream of something like the OCMW saying, hey, we're going to, take some subscriptions to this farm and let people come and harvest, and we consider that to be part of our contribution, but no one has sort of made those steps yet. And
you tried to?
Well, what's unfortunate is that we used to have a network that was a coordinator and was working on those kinds of topics. Also, for instance, approaching the social, what do you call it, mutualité, the social security, like the health insurance kind of thing, about approaching them. There's examples in the States of how people with a CSA subscription get a reduction in the price that they have to pay for healthcare, because it makes perfect sense. They're moving, they're walking, they're eating healthy food, but people haven't, it takes somebody that's not a farmer to work on those kinds of topics, and the person who was available to work on those topics lost her job. So it's a challenge. We see the issues as farmers, but we're not able to actually work on them very much ourselves.
I would like to react.
Oh yeah, but we so our scope are more focused on agroeconomic and economic aspects, but we contribute to networks, agroecology in action, for instance. We work. They are really strong on the sécurité sociale de l'alimentation, so security of food, and it's indeed a key message. One of the problematics will be to progressively we'll have to identify what is a healthy, sustainable food or products or ingredients that will be maybe financed in this social security system. And I think that then our study will contribute to saying, well, this is maybe organic production has this type of good results, or this type of mode of production are compliant with a good quality or sustainable system approach. So contributing that.
Maybe picking in on the access thing, I think there's two main issues who are interrelated. Access to the land for producers, for farmers who want to provide healthy food to local communities, which is a big issue. You have the Landgenoten, which is a beautiful organization who wants to buy up land and provide it to organic farmers for eternity as much as possible. And those are fighting again against the stream very much, where land prices are increasing. You could, around these parts, pay 100,000 euros per hectare for a piece of land, which, if you look at how much profit you can make from farming, you will have to live maybe two lives in total to be able to repay your investment for 1 hectare. And that's not even enough to start a profitable farm at. So that's one big issue, and then the access to the food which could come from these kind of lands in the end is also a big issue. And there's also a very big role, I think, for governments, public procurement. School food is a big leverage, I feel, for healthy foods, for letting kids, students, pupils come into contact with agriculture, with food, but also providing them with a healthy and nutritious meal. I think it's a human right, access to food, access to healthy food, appropriate food, and I think governments should play a more important role in that.
Great, thanks a lot. So I saw one hand, it was first, then here. So you try to be quick and we'll also be quick so that everyone has the opportunity. But yeah, please.
Hi, I work for the City of Mechelen, Local Authority. I work for the climate team and the circular economy team, it's a small team. But I really want to support the transition to a sustainable food system, and I would like to help to support farmers that contribute to this. But I sometimes get lost in terminology, like people speak about agroecology, restorative farming, circular farming, but I really would like to find maybe a sensible list with criteria that I have to take into account to work with. Can you give me some comments on that?
Well, the easiest start is to look at the organic farmers which are surrounding Mechelen. You've got lots of them. You have Zemst, you have, there's a whole series of them. They're doing markets in Mechelen. They're there.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for an easy way to screen out, that's a great place to start. It doesn't say it stops there, but starting with the organic farmers is a great place to start.
Yeah, but we don't want to exclude anyone, so we want to have all farmers involved, but I would like to have a set of criteria that I can say to other farmers, if you comply with this, you're doing a good job. You know what I mean? So these small set of organic farmers are a good example, but we would like to have everybody trying to do it.
I think looking at the examples of City of Ghent, for example, where I live and work, it's quite good because they also have endorsed agroecology, which is very vague and very arbitrary sometimes. But in the end, they came with a concrete policy. They have their food strategy, they have their agricultural strategy now, and they also want to include all farmers in this trajectory towards more agroecological and sustainable food systems. So, and they have struggles with it as well. It's quite difficult.
And how are they defining that? What kind of checklists are they working with, you know?
They endorse like the 13 principles of agroecology, but they even go further. They call it agroecology plus, because they want to have more access for people with disabilities, with a more social inequality perspective, and include those even more into this agroecology thing than the principles themselves tell about.
Okay, great. And yeah, and we also developed an evaluation or a set of indicators to, so yeah, we have a methodology helping farmers also to evaluate themselves through so yeah, the certain principles. So that's a methodology that Agroecology Europe developed. We can share it with you.
Okay, but the thing is, we don't want to make it too difficult for farmers to, how do you evaluate that? So you give more work then again.
Yeah, no,
that distracts them from the actual work. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess you would have the same problem with the consumers. I guess you want to keep the message quite clear. But and I would support what Jen said. It's often what we define is organic, and you can go further. Of course, agroecological aspect is going way further maybe than organic, but that's known. You can refer to it, to this organic concept, and it's still something easy. Restorative, regenerative, all of that is quite blurry, and it's maybe keeping us sidetracked of some good objectives that are set, agreed on, and there is a kind of consensus on this.
So yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, actually, you addressed my question. I was going to go and ask you if you believe there's any risks with using the term regenerative, because
yes.
I'm Daniel and I work for the European Environmental Bureau, and basically a lot of our internal concerns focuses around the co-opting of the term regenerative. Absolutely. And the extent to which that might lead certain companies to greenwash.
Absolutely.
Or not. We've also seen and had this concern with some of the civil dialogue groups being organised by the Commission, who have also chosen to use the same term, regenerative, lacking a clear definition or set of standards. So you kind of answered the question, but if you want to expand a little bit on the concerns.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's happening, and many of the regenerative farmers are basing their farming practices on the use of Roundup.
Yeah.
And then they say, oh, but we add molasses after we've sprayed it and it helps mitigate the effects on the water. And the whole thing is about soil biology. And nobody's talking about the impact of Roundup on soil biology. It's a problem. So yes, it's a problem.
But also, if I may add quickly to that, that's also so yeah.
And it's super inspiring. It's taken me as an organic farmer steps further than I had ever dreamed I would be taking.
Okay, that's good.
So don't throw it out just like that, but stay alert.
Perfect.
So.
I mean, do you reckon at some point there could be a unified
Well, you start to
definition?
have more and more that are talking about organic and agroecology in one breath,
Yeah.
talking about organic regenerative farming.
Okay.
And I think that's why I made the comment about everyone's talking about pesticides, but I think you really need to pay attention to what's happening with herbicides.
Yeah.
Because that's the biggest challenge for people transitioning to organic is, I mean, you can manage pests in other ways, but managing weeds is really difficult. So keep an eye on, keep an eye on the Roundup.
And that's great also as movements to get to know each other. I'm sure we have to learn from regenerative movements as well, organic movements, agroecology movement. We are the ones trying to offer solutions and sustainability pathways. So let's try to to align and to be consistent together. Sorry, there were.
Maybe just very short. When you have, where you want to be very clear to your farmers, I think you can also make a difference between what you communicate to farmers and what you have to do as a city. Because as a city you have a whole system, and you have to look to how can we change, what is our responsibility as a city, as policymakers. And then you have the whole story of agroecology with the systems change and so. But I think to make it not too complex for farmers, you can also start with just some steps and see what is going on for them, what can they do very concrete on their fields. And maybe you can work in steps so that they don't have to understand the whole story of agroecology, and maybe you don't have to tell at that first step this is about agroecology. You just tell this is about soil fertility or so. I think that's important to have the whole story in your mind, but just working little steps to different target groups.
Great, thanks. So there was a question, if you want, and then
thank you all for a very interesting and informative presentation. My question is for Leuven. You mentioned that in Flanders, there's only 1.6% of organic farm compared to 7.4% in Belgium. I was wondering what could be the reason for the disparity, is it geographical or the government initiative, or if there's something?
I think most important is geographical, because in Wallonia we have lots of grasslands which are permanent because they're just not compatible with arable farming. That's one reason, and it's much more easy to convert those farms to organic, because you have to adapt your practices very little, and then you can go for the organic label. So that's one of the main reasons. And the second reason is, and then I would draw France into the play as well, that Wallonia is somewhere between Flanders and France in their looks, their practices, their movement on agroecology, on organic. And France shows a quite strong movement towards organic. They have a very strong food culture, strong rural culture, whereas in Flanders this disappeared to a large extent, I feel. And this is maybe also something, but that's more difficult to pin down. It's something more cultural, something more social, and I can't put the exact name on it.
And to be honest, the history is intensive livestock production,
Also true.
which is very difficult, impossible to do.
Yeah.
And you have to link production and consumption. Well, the consumption pattern are different too. The money invested by a Walloon consumer is higher in organic products than the Flemish consumers or eaters for the moment.
So you had a question?
Yes, Patrick Girard from Oxfam Magazine du Monde. We are one member of Agroecology in Action, which gave some financial support to the study from CIFRA. One question for Ruben. You mentioned the fact that you would like to apply the study for Flanders. What will be your plan to apply the same methodology, which will give some advantages in terms of comparison, being able to compare with other study internationally? Or what challenges do you see in applying the same methodology? Obviously, at the end, it would be great to be able to consolidate numbers, to have numbers for the entire Belgian country, right? So, yeah.
Like after hearing about a study that's been done, I was inspired, and that's why I wanted to do something similar for Flanders, while I had the idea already somewhat vaguely in my mind before. So I'm going to be inspired by what's happened in the Wallonian context and try to apply it quite similarly as possible, to be comparable indeed, but it's going to be part of a slightly bigger consortium, let's say, with other players, other researchers as well. So there might be some other expectations in the end as well. For example, calculating proofs on what-if scenarios. So we're going to look at, there's going so much money to agroecology, so little money going to agroecology, but then what if we would leverage some subsidy, we would change it, the conditionality of it, the order of magnitude, or the tributaries in the end, what would then happen to the food system? So there might be a component on this, and I'll be able to tell and explain, hopefully, very soon.
Yes, so I think the time has run out, but thank you so much for having attended and participated to that session. We hope you learned something, and that you learned that we need to fight for more funding for agroecology. So yeah, if you want to stay in touch, here are our email addresses, and please reach out if you have any questions. Thank you so much, and let's keep the fight.